Hello everyone, my name is Fannie Shabangu. I work as a marine biologist for the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, Cape Town, and I'm excited to share my work which I've been doing for the past 7 years in bioacoustic monitoring in blue whales and other marine mammals in South Africa and Antarctic waters. Before I proceed, I'd like to thank my former supervisors, Professor Ken Finley and the late Professor Peter Best, for taking me on as a student and for introducing me to this interesting field. And I would like to thank the organizers of the ABC conference for inviting me to give this plenary talk. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Before I go on with this presentation, I would like to define some of the terms that I'll be using throughout this presentation. The first one will be AAR, which is the autonomous acoustic recorder. I'll mainly call it oral. And then we have the acoustic occurrence, which explains the acoustic presence of animals in an area. And then the behavior, which is the number of calls in a given time, and also that can be day, night, season, and also over years. And then we have harmonics, which are positive integer multiple of the original frequency. For example, if you have a call with the original frequency at 100 hertz, the harmonic will be at 200 hertz, and then the next harmonic will be at 300 hertz, and so on. And then we have sidebands, which are positive and negative integers of the original call frequency, and those indicate the rate of amplitude modulation over time. And then we have the Nyquist frequency, which is the maximum requested frequency from a recording, and that is usually calculated as half the sampling rate of the recorded bandwidth. So to start off, I'd like to explain why we use passive acoustic monitoring. So for the most marine mammals, they are vocal active and they produce sound through all seasons of the year and all under different weather conditions. And this methodology can be used at any time of the day as well. This tend to make this method cost effective of monitoring and tracking instrument animals over time. Furthermore, this sound tool is also important for marine mammals because they use it for communication, as we can see in the schematic, while calling to the other whale and they will respond. And they use it for navigation underwater, mainly at night or during the day when they are in the deep dark water. And also use it for mating advertisements and all those kind. Also for prey searching, which is echolocation, as we can see with this dolphin example where they send a signal and they can use the received signal to triangulate where the receive target comes from. And they can also use it for danger avoidance and also for avoiding predators. If they know that like a killer whale is in an area, they can hear the sound and then they can avoid that particular area because they know that there are predators there. Why do we specifically study marine mammals in this case? For me, it's mainly because most of them they were harvested during the whaling era, and nowadays it is very useful or important for us to know how are the populations doing over time. Where do they occur? What kind of habitats need to be protected for these animals to recover? And this graph on the left shows the catch histories for most baleen whales in the southern hemisphere. We can see humpback whales started earlier, and then blue whales, fin whales, sperm whales. And what's interesting as well seems to be a shift when one stock is sort of harvested to the optimum, and then they shift to the next one, and so on to optimize profit over time. And it can also be seen here with the southern right whales, where they were the abundance was high pre-whaling, and when whaling starting, then we just a significant drop in abundance until when it stopped in the late or in the 70s, 80s, and then now we're seeing an increase in the number of whales, or projected increase in the number of southern right whales. So most of the whales, by the time the protection was implemented, it was too late. For example, with a blue whale, we can see they have collapsed. It was about 1 to 3% of the population that was remaining, and it was it just now require more information for us to know more about these animals. That's passive acoustic monitoring is important, and also the ICN. Most of them are classified as endangered, of concern, vulnerable, and sometimes near threatened. And we can see of humpback whales, they are least concern, but blue and fin whales, which are the species that have been studied, are critical and critical endangered and endangered respectively. And some of the other species that occur, they are of concern in a way. So two study sites were used for the mooring data collection. One was in the Benguela ecosystem, which collected data from 2014 until 2017. So the Benguela ecosystem is important for these whales as they use it for overwintering, calving, mating, migration, and feeding. And as we can see from this figure, the Benguela ecosystem extends from the south coast of South Africa all the way to the southern border of Angola. And the Benguela current is a cold current, you can see here, of nutrient rich. And we have another current on the east coast of South Africa, which is Agala's current, which is warm and nutrient poor current. And one other thing we can see with this deployment is that the position of each deployment or mooring relative to the coast. Oral 2 and Oral 3, they were about 70 kilometers from the nearest coastline, and then Oral 4, which was further, was about 315 kilometers offshore. And then we had the data collected in Antarctica, which was here in the East Weddell Sea, and we can see data was collected of a seamount of the mud rise, where the depth varied from 4,000 meters and increased to just over 1,000 meters, or just under 1,000 meters. And then with that shoaling of that formation of a seamount, it induces upwelling as the water flows, or the under deep water current of the Antarctica flows. Water's reflected up, and then it causes upwelling, and that relatively warm water that is brought to the surface, it melts ice in spring and causes the formation of polynyas, which are just open water surrounded by ice, and I'll talk more about that later. And such polynyas or upwelled water are very important for the phytoplankton blooms that support krill, which are food for most marine mammals. So how did we collect this data in South Africa? We use mooring for collecting data for most recent studies, which were collected on oceanographic moorings, where we had the mooring, which had all the suite of oceanographic instruments, and then on the top buoy, which was about 300 in this case, where then a hydrophone deployed. And hydrophone, or the oral comprised of a hydrophone, a mini computer, and a battery pack that supported it for the whole duration of the deployment. And then in Antarctica, we had a special design mooring, which was specifically designed for acoustic data collection, and that was deployed on top of the mud rise, as you have seen in the previous map. And that comprised of the anchor, the acoustic release, which was used for releasing the mooring when we come to retrieve it. And then you have the hydrophone, which was deployed at 250 meters, and also the float on the top of the hydrophone to keep the mooring upright. For the collected data, we analyze it using a random forest model. I chose this model because it's an assembly model method that grows multiple trees, decision trees, during the training process, as can be seen in this picture. We have a lot of trees here, and each decision tree will output its prediction results corresponding to the input. The forest will use voting mechanism to select the most voted classes in the prediction results. As we can see, you have a lot of trees which are planted in this theoretical forest, and we see the red ones. Those are the ones that are voted, and those are going to be used in the model for predicting our results. And another powerful thing about this random forest model is that it's a non-parametric model, meaning it doesn't assume distribution of the data. It feeds the data as it is and randomly sort of bootstraps to get the best prediction results from your data. And other models which we use for smoothing of the data, I use the generalized additive model for circular smoothing, and also I also use the Welsh two-sample t-test to compare between different samples. And I'll tell you some of the results later. So now looking into detailed results, I'll start with the Antarctic blue and finwell results, which were based on the data which I just showed you how it was collected. From that, we produced 4 papers which looked into evaluating the effect of environmental conditions on acoustic occurrence and behavior of Antarctic blue whales, and we look into the seasonality, behavior, and detection ranges of blue whales under different ice conditions. And this one was done, the third one was done on the west coast of South Africa, where we look into the effect of environmental conditions on the occurrence and colony behavior of blue whales. And the last paper was mainly looking into the management of data, which was interesting. As a result from this work, we showed that about 36% of the acoustic data collected from the SOA cruise was lost due to uncoordinated data analysis, or rather due to uncoordinated data management, which is scary in a way because so much money is spent in collecting this data. And I'll talk more about that towards my conclusion, how we can avoid such things in future research. So these are some of the findings from those papers. For blue whales, this was the first study, or some of the work was the first to show harmonics of blue whales recorded near or under ice. And we can see this is a blue whale Z call. That's how it sounds like. And the Z call is termed so because it looks like a Z, as we can see here. It's got the first unit, the second unit, and the third unit, sometimes called A, B, C. And for later, I think I'll refer it to as unit A. And these were harmonics which were recorded, which have never been recorded for blue whales, indicating that the animals which were detected from the sounds were very close to the sound, to the recorder. And furthermore, we can see that the amplitude, which shows the energy from the sound, is not distorted, meaning this is not a distortion of the recorder, but a true biological feature which was detected from the sounds. And another call which was recorded from that work was a D call, which is produced during the feeding. And it just when whales are feeding, they're using it for short communication. And it has been shown by a recent study that showed that this call can be produced by whales that are during mating, where they use it for communicating, and also for threatening other males in a region, so that males can or have access to a particular female. And this is how the Z call sounds like. So these are very low frequency sounds that will not be heard without being amplified. And I've amplified the sound so that it can be audible to us. And now we'll show you some of the results of the acoustic occurrence of blue whales and fin whales in South Africa. So one of the key thing I must indicate with my slides, I'll have pictures of the whales which I'll be talking about. In this case, it's a blue whale and a fin whale. Just in case you don't remember what I'm talking about, you can look in the picture and be able to identify what species I'm talking about. So for blue whale, proportion of occurrence over time, we saw in 2014 that the occurrence was high in June, July, August until September. That's when we stopped recording. And the same was for fin whale from July to about October in that case. And then for oral 2, which was deployed in September, it only detected blue whale sound in September. And it didn't record for this year until the following year, where I started recording again. And then the peak was also around June, July. It was interesting that these hydrophones, which were 4 kilometers apart, could not be able to detect the similar sounds at the same time of deployment. And I'll talk more about that later when I talk about the Southern right whales and humpback whales results. From recent deployments, after the first deployment, we found year-round presence of whales, which can be seen by the dark bars of the black bars, which shows the presence of blue whales And we can saw from December until the end of the deployment, or close to the end of the deployment in 2017, for oral 1, or rather in this case it's oral 2. That's where most of the sounds were detected, which shows that the seasonality of whales, at least for blue whales, it changes from year to year, and it will be very interesting for us to continue or have a long-term monitoring program to be able to tell what years and what environmental conditions detect such changes in occurrence of whales. Now moving into Antarctica, we saw a kind of a similar pattern to 2016, where we had a year-round presence, and that can be seen for blue whales with these light gray bars that blue whales were present for the whole duration of the deployment, and fin whale were present in January and March. And however, the chorus that comprises the 18 to 28 chorus, which comprises of calls from fin whale and blue whales, was detected from February all the way to September, when the recorder stopped recording. So with fin whales, it is known that they tend to avoid ice, and our results show that there was a negative correlation with sea ice. When sea ice started to form in around the mud rise, fin whales calls started to disappear. But it is interesting that we detecting the chorus in up to September, when most of the calls were not recorded. And then we looked into the behavior of these whales in South Africa and in Antarctica, and we see a completely different behavior between the two sides. We can see, yes, South Africa in winter, most of the calls or the call rates are during the day, and then in Antarctica, sort of a drop during the day in winter, and then the peak is just after sunset and until again to early morning. And the same with spring, where we had a drop during the day or a decrease during the day of Z calls during the day, and in Antarctica it's opposite, an increase in calls during the day, which is interesting because these are different sites are used for different purposes. Antarctica, we know that it's mostly used for feeding, and South Africa, or the west coast of South Africa, should be for overwintering and mating, or also breeding at some stage. So it was quite interesting to see that these whales adopt behavior according to the site where they occur at a given time. And then we'll look into the detection ranges for us to be able to tell what are the environmental conditions and how far were these whales calling from, given that we know that whales, specifically blue and fin whale sounds, can be detected from thousands or from tens to thousands of kilometers. And it was interesting that here in South Africa, the maximum detection ranges were about 60 kilometers. And then in Antarctica, in spring, we had a detection range as high as 1,400 kilometers. And that was mainly because of variation in noise levels, where in South Africa we have ships, we have a lot of noise, and that tends to reduce the detection ranges of these whales. Whereas in Antarctica, especially in spring, the area was covered in ice, hence the detection ranges were that high. And then we'll look into the predictors of occurrence in South Africa and Antarctica. We can see in both cases, in Antarctica and South Africa, month of the year seem to be the most important predictor of the occurrence of these whales. Meaning, if you know the month of the year, a particular month of the year, and you go record sounds in an area, you'll be able to detect the sounds, these whales. And also, what was important as well is the environmental conditions, and we can see that with which are related to productivity, especially with the Ekman upwelling index, which is the UIE here, which and also the sea surface height, wind speed, and chlorophyll A were important for predicting the occurrence of these whales, which is also encouraging or important for us to know what kind of environmental conditions these whales prefer, and what will be the effect of future climate change or global warming in the case of different oceans. And furthermore, this is important given that there have been changes in terms of the vocal or acoustic behavior of these whales, We've seen with blue whales, Antarctic blue whales, that there's been a change in the vocalizing frequency. They've decreased from 28 hertz. Now they're sitting at about 26, 25 hertz over time, and that is not known. Why are they changing their vocalization frequency? Is it because of noise? Is it because of the environment, or is it something else that we don't know? And looking in this kind of things, this will be very useful for us to make a bigger picture of what's happening with these whales over time. And it's not only blue whales that are only detected to have a change or have changed their acoustic behavior over time. We've seen it in the Pacific Ocean as well, right? The Southeast Pacific blue whale have also decreased, or is also decreasing with time. This is a recent study which was published this year, where we found that the whale vocalization, or the pulse rate for one of the unit of its call, decrease over time. So it's important for us to continue to monitor these environmental conditions, and also the whale occurrences, for us to know why are they changing their behavior and why are they changing their occurrences over time. And now I'll move on to another baleen whale, the minke whale. This was one of the byproduct of the studies which we did, where we're collecting data, and there's a picture of a minke whale. If you lose track of where I am talking about minke whales, and from these results we're able to describe a new biodark subcall type for the minke whale, which was detected both in Antarctica and South Africa, meaning it's from minke whale, it's not from dwarf or pygmy minke whale. So it was interesting for us to do that. And these results also provided the first description of seasonality and behavior of these whales in South African waters. So basically, this is how a minke whale calls, or minke whale biodark look like. And they're called biodarks, or quacks sometimes, because they sound mainly like ducks, and this is how they sound like. So the first people who first heard this underwater, they're like, oh, this is interesting. This is a biodark. We have not heard of anything like this. And then the term is called a biodark. And from our results, it was interesting for us to record harmonics to as high as 2 kilohertz, because previous studies has recorded them to 1 kilohertz. And our biodark had 12 pulses instead of 13 to 14 pulses, which were detected by Domino and Sorovic et al. In 2017. And also, what's interesting, or what's happening with other studies following our studies, is that they are detecting also minke whale biodarks as high as 2.5 kilohertz, which is a good thing, that showing that our results are realistic if other studies are also detecting this call type. And we can see these are the other biodarks which are recorded from minke whales, which were also detected from our study. And then we look into the acoustic occurrence of minke whales, and we can see from this study that there was a concurrent detection of minke whale biodark in South Africa, which is this one, SEC2, and oral one, which was in Antarctica, meaning these whales are there in Antarctica and South Africa at the same time, which was quite interesting. That one will have, or previous records were showing that whales migrate completely out of a region and they are not there, but this shows that this is a proportional, complicated, or complex migration, where a proportion migrate out of a region and a proportion remains in a particular area. Furthermore, that was interesting, similar to blue whales, or opposite to blue whales, is that oral 1 in this case is detecting less minke whales, and then oral 2, which was deployed at 300 meters, is detecting more minke whales than the other one. And then we looked into this, and we tried to understand what could be predicting the occurrences of these whales in both Antarctica and South Africa. And we looked into the month, distance to the sea ice, and day and time of the day. And basically, we can see that from April through September, when the sea ice was close to the recorder, or our recorder was covered by ice, that's where we started recording a lot of these minke well bioducts. Thus, our random forest model results showed that month of the year, they equally predict the occurrence of these wells in Antarctica. That's month matters, and given that this is an ice-loving species, it does make sense that distance to the sea ice edge is important. And we ask ourselves, how could these whales be maintaining presence in an area that is covered by ice? Remember, I told you about pollinators, and we can see them here. This is a picture of a pollinator. We have ice around it, and this is a pollinator. And this is how these animals, and this is where our recorder was based. Basically, you can see that given this open area, this is how these animals maintain their presence in the ice-covered area. They're able to breathe in this open area, and they can feed on ice, on krill that is under ice, and maintain their presence and meet all the nutritional requirements that they need for them to succeed year round. And furthermore, we looked into the simulation, and I apologize for the German figure, which is here. Basically, this shows that it's a simulation of ocean temperature in the Polonia region. And we can see here that when in years when, or yes, in model years when we had or there's high water temperatures, that's where we had pollinators which are black. And when there's blue, which is cold water, there were no pollinators, meaning that these pollinators are formed by those upwelling water, which is caused by the seamount itself, which is the mud rise, causes the water to move up to the surface and causes the formation of these pollinators, which support and maintain the presence of whales and seals during winter when there is high ice concentration. And this is just a picture of show that the minke whale is a picture of a minke whale. It's a ice-loving species and can be found in areas which is ice infected, as we can see in this infested, as we can see in this picture. Excuse me. As we can see in these figures, that time of the day, there's not much difference between day and night. The cause seem to be occurring randomly. But it seems if we're recording mostly in September, October, and also December and January, that's when you're most likely to be able to detect these minke whale sounds as shown from our recordings. And now I'll move on to sovereign right whales, and this is based on a paper which was recently accepted at the Marine Mammal Science Journal, and this is where again the recordings were done. Previous knowledge of acoustic occurrence and behavior of sovereign right whales in South Africa was based on research conducted inshore, and it was very important for us to expand this or extend this research to offshore, as we looked into this offshore region to see when do these whales occur and how do they use the offshore region compared to the inshore region. Furthermore, sovereign right whales are of current high concern in South African waters, given the recent low count in whale numbers. So from aerial surveys of the University of Pretoria, it was very important that we get some insight into what could be possibly causing such decline and why are they declining at this rate. And given that there were no detection ranges estimated for sovereign right whales in South African waters, we also estimated the detection ranges in South Africa. So sovereign right whales produce about 13 sound types. We'll not talk more about the other sound types because those were not recorded from our study. We only detected gunshot sounds. Gunshot sounds are termed so because they sound like a gunshot, like a rifle, as we can see here in the picture, the former President Barack Obama firing a gunshot, a rifle. That's how sovereign right whale gunshot sounds like. Yeah, so these sounds can be detected with just one pulse or two, and they can have as much as 4 pulses. And we can see from this case that we detected 2 pulses. What was also interesting, which was not found in previous studies, is that they didn't have this echoes of the sound, which we can be seen here, which are usually, and the reverberation, which are usually reflected off the bottom of the seafloor, meaning these animals were very close to the recorder. And furthermore, because these animals were very close to the recorder, we had clipping of the sound. You can see the amplitude are not the same as those of the blue whales, which I showed you earlier, or rather like these ones. They are all flat on top and at the bottom, meaning they've been clipped because the gain of the recorder was exceeded and it could not record those sounds anymore. And looking into their diurnal vocalizing pattern, we saw mainly in spring. The other seasons didn't have much of a pattern because there were very few calls or very few sounds recorded in those months. But for spring, there was a clear pattern where less sounds were detected during the day, and they seemed to increase just before sunset, and then at night we had a high, and then also and then just after sunrise or just after dawn, then had a drop again in sounds. And the same in winter, where it seemed to be slightly delayed in winter, where the increase was just after dawn, and then during the day dropped again. And the same for the call rates seem to be following the same pattern. So mostly with what has been observed elsewhere is that suffering right whales, they do not use a lot of sound during the day because they have visual cues to communicate with conspecies. And then at night when it's dark, that's when they tend to use sound for communication with their conspecies, mainly for mating, and sometimes it's believed that these sounds could be used for prey detection. The discrepancy which we saw here, in this case, we looked into the detection, and oral 1 detected high sounds, had high noise levels, and that reflected in the detection ranges, where we can see oral 1 had lower detection ranges just below 40 kilometers, and oral 2 had detection range as high as 70 kilometers, which was kind of weird or different in a way, because physics tells us that oral 2 should be detecting more calls than oral 1. And the next slide will actually give an indication as to why is oral 1 detecting more calls than oral 2. Position. The recorder was above or below the recorder position. It determines the amount of sound that will have been recorded by the receiver. In this case, with our recorder, which was positioned at 200 meters, oral 2 able to detect sounds, and sounds from were not detected by oral 2, which was positioned at 300 meters. So this is something interesting that many studies in the future might be interested in looking into, and also might help us with the design of our future studies. That maybe we need to have for us to study those shallow and deep water species, have hydrophone on the same mooring, one in the shallow and one in the deep waters, for us to accurately detect the sounds of these animals. And now I'll move on to sperm whales. And we know sperm whales are deep diving species. They prefer to be in the deeper waters. So it was interesting for us that we could be able to detect them with these instruments which were deployed to study baleen whales. So in the spectrograms, what we can see is that we have the red line, which indicates the sampling rate of the nucleus frequency of oral 2 and oral 1. And then this one will be the nucleus frequency of oral 3 and oral 4. So it was encouraging for us that we can be able to detect the sperm whale clicks, or low frequency sperm whale click components, with these low sampling rates, which were designed for studying baleen whales. And it shows that these results or other studies like this can be used for multi-species research. And this is how the sperm whale click sounds like. So these are short duration clicks. They usually range from 0.1 to 0.5 seconds in duration, depending on the click type. For sperm whale, we look into the noise and detection ranges, since we wanted to know how the environmental conditions were affecting their distribution. So we evaluated their detection ranges, and it was interesting, similar to saffron right whales as well. There was a high correlation between noise and detection range, where when the noise was high, we had low detection ranges, and when the noise was low, we had high detection ranges. And this is the journal click pattern of sperm whales. We saw that in summer, the sperm whale clicks were high during the day, and in autumn, there seemed to be not much of a variation, except for these small bump here and during the day. And for winter, depending on the oral, some orals or some locations had low sperm whale clicks during the day, and some they had an increase. And then in spring, we can see for oral 3 and oral 1, there were high clicks during the day. So we looked this and compared to what the whaling data showed. It showed that most of these of the whaling data based on Peter Best's work, it showed that most of sperm whales were feeding at any time of the day. They were able to dive to deeper depths during the day, and they're also able to forage to any depth during the night as well. Meaning it doesn't really matter what time of the day the sperm whales are able to feed. They're able to localize prey, since they're using most of the clicks for echolocation. And this is the acoustic occurrence over time in South African waters, and we can see that these are deep diving species. We can see high detections on the instrument that was deployed in deeper waters, and low on those deployed in shallow waters. And also we're seeing a year-round presence of these animals compared to other species of baleen whales, where we had gaps in between, but we seem to be detecting them year-round, which was quite interesting, and also confirming what was found previously from whaling research, that these animals are present in South African waters year-round. And we'll look into what could be predicting the acoustic occurrence. In the interest of time, I'll not go into detail or describe all of these other graphs. I'll just take you straight away to the main ranked predictors of occurrence. And we can see in most sites, especially oral 2 and 3, that's month of the year. It is very important what month of the year we record. That's where we detected a lot of sounds. Thus, it's ranked as the most important predictor. And for the other two sites, seems to be environmental conditions, your daylight, sea surface height, chlorophyll, wind speed. Those seem to be playing a very important role as to when the whales will be available, or when they can be detected in that particular area compared to this area. And furthermore, what can be highlighted with this oral 2 and 3 is that's where we detected a lot of sperm whales, and also whale cages indicated that's where most of the cages were produced. So that seemed to be the most important habitat, or one of the important habitat of this species in the South African west coast. And now moving on to humpback whales. This is also work in progress, and we can see different humpback whale song phrases which we detected off the west coast of South Africa and also in Antarctica. And this is how they sound like. So these are humpback whale sounds, which are used mostly for display and for communication. And furthermore, before I move on, this one is that we're able to concurrently detect sounds in Antarctica and South Africa, and we can see here in September that sounds were detected both in Antarctica and South Africa, meaning similar to minke whales, there seem to be a complex migration pattern where whales are not migrating out of the region. They are both present in both latitudes, the high and the low latitude. And it was mostly the detection of seasonal, mostly in autumn and winter. That's where in winter and spring, that's when we're detecting a lot of this of these sounds. So future work will involve detection of the song ranges, and we can hopefully be able to determine what environmental condition predicts their occurrence. And the song type, it seems song type percentage use, it seems like over time they're using a lot of song fragments compared to the full songs. Songs are produced in low proportions on low percentages compared to the song fragments, and that makes sense because songs produce a full song is very energy expensive compared to just testing the waters by just producing a song fragment. If there's a response, then you can take it to the next level and produce a full songs. And that has been seen with birds as well, that they tend to produce song fragments in high proportions and switch to the full song when they see they need to, because it just costs a lot of energy to produce the songs, and there's no reward for it, basically. So that's why they seem to be high song fragments than full songs. And then we look into the diurnal or daily diurnal singing pattern. We see in most sites there's low songs during the day, and high at night. And that was interesting, which previous studies have found that, as with other whales, they seem to using visual cues for communication during the day, and then they switch to acoustic communication at night when it's dark and they cannot be able to see their convex species, and sound seemed to be the proper tool to use for that. And that was also interesting when we saw other results from other studies which look into the diving behavior, where we can see during the day, which is the light year, whales seem to dive to deeper waters and to feed, and then at night they're diving a lot in shallow waters. So it could be also that these songs then also could be used for foraging other than for communication, where they use most of these sounds at night when the prey, the krill, migrated to the surface, and then they're using the sounds for also communicating with their co-species. Another discovery from this work was this crab eater seal, which was found when I was looking for minke whales, and it was just something that I was not looking for and was interesting. And basically, this is how the sound looked like, and we termed the call short mount call. I will because it's shorter than what was previously found, and I'll show you more about it. And this is how it sounds like. So this is the call type or the description of my call type, and I compared to what was found previously by Kling et al. 2010, and we can see, or we found that a significant difference in terms of their mean frequency. Ours seemed to had a higher mean frequency. There was no significant difference in terms of the peak frequency, which indicated that the species or the seals detected of similar size, given that peak frequency tend to be correlated with the seal size. And then there was a significant difference in the duration. Our call type was shorter than what was previously found, of 2.5 hours was 2.2 seconds longer. And the pulse repetition rate of our sound was slightly longer than what was previously found. In terms of the acoustic occurrence, this seemed to follow the same trend as minke whales seen from in the Southern Ocean, where they seem to be loving ice. The minute we have ice, which is the bars, the distance to the sea ice edge, there seem to be an increase in the number of seal sounds that were detected. And furthermore, from this work, we've seen that previous studies detected sound from October to December, and our study we're detecting from April, earlier than what was previously detected for crab eater seals. So it was useful expanding our knowledge about crab eater seals. And their sounds, the dual vocalization patterns seem to be producing less calls during the day and more calls during the night. That makes sense because most seals are hauled out of water during the day to rest on sea ice, and they mostly dive at night. That's when they're vocalizing. And their occurrence, just like minke whales, detected by or predicted by distance to the sea ice and month of the year. Other seals we look to into is the roll seal and the leopard seal, and this is a work in under review, and this was based on the results from the SOA cruises and the Scala cruises, and we see with these occurrences of whale that they seem to be preferring particular areas. Specifically here we had a lump of detections, and here also another detection peak of these animals. And this is the usage of the calls. For raw seals, they seem to be using the sounds mostly equally, and leopard seals seem to be complex, seeming to be changing their call usage over time. And the vocalizing patterns seems leopard seals vocalize more during the day, contrary to crab eater seals, and the same for raw seals. They seem to be vocalizing more during the day. Occurrence, we see that month of the year was important for leopard seals, but for raw seals seem to be important where the latitude and the longitude seem to be predicting where each call type will be detected. And once again, in the interest of time, I will not discuss these results in detail. Looking into further studies or other work which I'm going to do is to look into effects of ambient noise, and we can see here this is the noise over time. This is from 0 to 500, which is where most ship noise occur. We can see a change over time, and that's I'm planning to look into the IS data to see the movements of ships around the moorings and determine how much of this noise is affecting the occurrence of these whales which we have detected before. So to conclude, I would like to look into the future research and challenges in Africa. So back in 2014, Ken and I wrote this chapter, and we concluded from that chapter that bioacoustic research in South Africa is still in its infancy. But based on the work that I've done in TES and other groups that have done in the previous years, I feel that now this should be upgraded to early childhood, meaning that we have done some development. There's been some development in this research in the African region. And also, I still like to conclude with this presentation that there's an opportunity to expand or extend this passive acoustic research to other marine texts to obtain useful data about the animals without disturbing the environment. So some of the challenges that I think are limiting most of African research, that includes acoustic knowledge and expertise. Most of us do not have such knowledge or expertise about acoustics, and that limits the use of such instruments and of such tool. And analytics of this data needs for us to have training and workshops that might be very helpful for some scientists to be able to do that. Funding and research instruments are also limiting, where we don't have funding to conduct research. And I think organizations like the International Whaling Commission, National Geographic, the Society of Marine Mammalogy, they can also be helpful with funding some of this research. And also collaborators can help with funding or helping with providing some of the instruments. Mentorship and support and other thing which will be useful is to get support of this data collection and data management, so that the data collected is not lost, since we have so much time is spent on collecting the data. And we know where there is a will, there is a way. If we all want to do this, we can make it happen. Involvement of government and regulatory organization and other authority bodies will be useful for using this tool as a monitoring tool. And coordinated community such as the ABC and also a library like the Makulori Library would be useful for Africa to have a kind of a library where we can have reference of what sounds types have been collected in particular regions. I would like to thank my sponsors, my collaborators, and my colleagues for the help with this work. It will have not been possible without their help. And I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention, and now I'll take questions.
Yes.
Yes, it's working now. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your talk. I was just, really interesting to see all the work that you've been doing. And I'm going to definitely be looking back through this talk as well for the next weeks, I think, and really looking at all those slides in really good detail. It's a really nice talk. Thank you so much. And we have had quite a few questions come in, which we will pop up with now. Just for those people, and there was a couple of people who did have issues with their sound during that. We have logged a call with the Hoover platform, just in case there's anything they can do to help out. But also just a reminder that the talks are available up on the platform for the next few weeks. So if anybody did have issues with the sound during the plenary there, then they can go back and watch those at in their own time. Fannie, I'll just kick off with the questions. So the one that got the top number of votes, so I'm going to go for it first, is how may cetaceans use sound for danger avoidance?
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thanks for the question. And I would like to apologize. I'm not dressed for the equation. I didn't know that I'll be on video. Yes, so cetaceans can use mainly sound, especially with ships. If they can hear ships, they can avoid it to move out of the way. And that has been seen with the change in frequency of ships over time, as now ships are becoming quieter. There have been an increase in the number of ship strikes of blue and other whales because they cannot hear the sounds, or they overlap with their vocalizing frequencies. So it is important that they're able to hear, and they can also increase their reaction time, and that will enable them to avoid such danger. So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, brilliant. But the next question, which comes from Jaco Westfeld, is how do you determine the detection range of the AARs for specific whale species?
Okay, so we use a model to do that. So the detection ranges are all theoretical, based on a bellhop model, which is a beam tracer model. And for us to do that, you need a source level of your target species, and also need to do some measurements of the noise level, and also have the data of the temperature and salinity, so you can be able to have your sound speed profile, which will be used for determining how much sound will be lost through transmission loss over time. So basically, in short, that's how the detection ranges were determined. They are not practical, or rather related to what the animals are experiencing in time, but it's based on the environment and the source levels, which are determined from previous studies.
Great, thank you. Okay, just time for one or two more questions. So Sasha asks, what's the main challenges you have had when using such deep moorings for PAM?
Because most of our moorings or our recorders record positioning the software channel, is the changes in environmental changes over time, where the thermocline is sometimes above or below the recorder depth, and that excludes some of the sounds which we're supposed to be recording, as we've seen with software right wells, where instruments are very close to each other and they were not able to detect that. And also we have problems with the current that seem to blow the mooring to a side, and sometimes it can blow the mooring below the depth rating of the recorder, and that might cause problems. Sometimes if you don't have an additional pressure release, it might cause a problem of the recorder. It might stop working or just break in that way. But overall, these deep moorings, they seem to work well. They don't have problems. They seem to be realistic, and we work with oceanographers who've got years and years of experience in deploying these deep moorings, so they help a lot with their deployment.
Wonderful. And just one final question from Jessica Stowe. She asks, what is the application of these acoustic studies? I.e., are there marine protection laws and maritime laws being changed in response to the work?
Yes, they've been changed. For example, in the US, they've been changing their laws in terms of the speed the ships will be traveling at a given time of the year, given the seasonal occurrence of the whales. So if whales are occurring at a particular time of the year, to reduce ship strikes, they have reduced the speed so that they can give whales enough time to react to the ships. And there's no such work done in South Africa, which is why this work would be useful, and in other parts of Africa as well, for us to know when these animals are occurring and how can we help in terms of reducing impact from anthropogenic noise, which will increase with the blue economy or ocean's economy. And it would be very useful for us to have these results from this kind of work. And also in other regions like Antarctica, where we can have a long-term monitoring program where we can tell what the results were before. Sorry about that. My son is here at home. He's sick today.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I can see, Fannie, that we've got quite a number of extra questions that have come in. So if you've got time, maybe later in the day, to answer those people who've asked questions on the app or on the platform, then that would be wonderful, because I can see there was a lot of interest in your plenary. It was really great to get such an overview of all the work that you've been doing, and I just thank you so much for your contribution today and for your talk. We're going to move on.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. And I hope your son gets better soon.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Cheers.